That's right. Survival Worldwide is back on Reality Pop. I'm your host, Chris Swanepoel, and with me today is Riley. Riley, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, g'day, Chris. It's great to be back. Another week of Australian Survivor is done. So much content this week on our screens. We got to be introduced to some big characters, and we also got to farewell some of them as well. So it's just been a massive week. Also, lots of backlash, lots of controversy surrounding this week. So it's going to be great to discuss all the highs and lows of this week. I mean, from everything to George to Cara to Simon, there's so much to discuss here that I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, there's been a couple of times this week where I felt like the internet was being broken by George and some of the antics that he got up to within these three episodes, I should say. So it was great to watch. We've got Marcus Evans here in the chat. Marcus, welcome to the live stream. Always great to have you here, and really looking forward to having the live chat. Sort of get involved with the questions. How we're going to run this specific recap is it's going to be a lot more free form compared to what you're used to when we do our Survivor South Africa recaps, where we normally in a chronological order go through the episodes as to what happened, because obviously we've got 3 episodes to talk about here, not just one episode. So I felt like we're probably going to address some of the bigger points throughout these 3 episodes and the things that we thought stood out for us. And one of the really big things for me, we've got a couple other people jumping in here. Just want to say hello to Jimmy. Good to have you in the chat. First time watcher in Something Wicked. Really, really good to have you here in the chat with us today as well. And Anthony Winters, hello and welcome to the stream as well. So one of the things we really want to get into, Riley, and I sort of gave you a little bit of a hint that we're going to talk about this. I know you're one of those people that normally don't want to get into the edit too much. I really do get stuck in the edit when it comes to Survivor quite a lot, because I feel like half of the fun is trying to dissect who are the big players, who are the people that are going to go all the way in the game and most likely will win it. So I feel like it's a game within a game to try and figure out what the producers are doing. Riley, what has your thoughts been on the edit so far this season?
Well, I think the thing with Australian Survivor is you always get those big characters like your Georges in this case that really emerge early on in the season. And obviously some of your players that hide behind the spotlight. Benny was a great example this season. Obviously, he only got content in his last episode, his boot episode. Whereas before that, I don't think he got a single confessional other than in his last episode. So you do get those sort of discrepancies. Although I suppose with Australian Survivor, though, it all depends on where the drama is being created. Honestly, I don't have a problem if George is on our TV screen all the time, although I have seen a lot of people on social media being really annoyed with what George has been up to this past week and saying they're even going to turn off the TV, which I think, there's plenty more drama to come. So I wouldn't be turning it off just yet. But we are starting to see those really big characters like George. Simon is one of the big ones. Flick is emerging as a big character. They're really starting to emerge now. So it's, we're getting a lot of them in the limelight. But others like Laura and Georgia, we're not seeing much of it all.
You're missing the Kingpin, Joey, who is also here in the episode. When we look at the confessionals and through these first couple of episodes, I can understand why there's a lot of upsetness within the fandom at the moment, because, you've got Simon, who obviously is one of the people that is in my draft team. So really happy that he's getting all this airtime, but we'll talk about him. I am still worried for him because he's such a big player. He's had 36 confessionals so far this season, which is the most of anybody in Australian Survivor this season. And then George would be second at 34. And a very big character that you missed there is Joey, who's the third person there at 27. It's quite a lot of confessionals, and he's becoming sort of the person that's, I feel like, gunning at George, and George is not fully aware that Joey is coming at him directly, because George is aiming at other people within that alliance. He's aiming at Laura, he's aiming at Georgia. So he's got some other targets there. And then one of the things that I find quite interesting is that within the Brains tribe, really, if you look at it, like you mentioned Flick there and Kez being 2 other big players, and I felt like Shannon is being under-edited quite a lot for me personally in these first couple of episodes. Like, I feel like she's more of a leader than what we're seeing and making some of these decisions. We saw in this episode, the first one, in episode 4, when they go to tribal council, she's aware of where the votes were going to go. She actually knew that Danny was going to flip his vote to go against Benny, which I found to be really interesting. And she talks about that when she goes to tribal council there as well. So for me, the edit has been a bit strange this season. I don't think it completely takes away from where the season can go as a whole, but I do love Australian Survivor as a whole product. But I feel like the biggest criticism of it at this point for me has been that it's been lopsided to certain players. I love George as much as the next person. You know me, I came into this podcast defending George that first week, saying, he's great TV. I still think he's great TV, but I don't really need to hear George tell me 3 or 4 times that he's the best player this season and he's the smartest brain and all the same things. I feel like there's a lot of repetitiveness happening there. I don't get the same repetitiveness from Simon, though. How do you think the edit compares for both of those two big players at this point in the game?
Yeah, well, I certainly think with the Brains tribe at the moment, it's really George is on the bottom. He's been ostracized by his whole tribe, so he's really trying to fight for his life here. And he's a big character as well. He's a politician. He's always out there giving all these sound bites, trying to fight for his life. And we obviously saw a lot of him, getting down and dirty, trying to find idols, trying to create alliances this week. So I certainly understand why we saw a lot from him. With Simon, on the other hand, we've seen a lot early in the season. Last week, we got a lot of him as the leader of the tribe, obviously also the leader of that alliance between him, Emmett, and Gavin being the third who went home last week. And again, in this episode 4 this week, earlier, we saw that he found the idol. So he's starting to get very involved in the game. I don't think he's emerging as, one of the bigger characters, but more so the game is sort of revolving around him at this point. Where he has the idol, he's been blindsided a couple of times, and now he's out for revenge after this, after that Gavin blindside.
Yes, so we've got Marcus here in the chat saying that the edit isn't as bad as All Stars, and he feels like All Stars was a lot more sort of, I guess, the David show when we watched that, and it's probably true to a certain degree. And I think, Marcus, with All Stars, the producers felt like they didn't have to give us as much when it came to the players because we already knew who some of these players were that were returning to play the game for a second time. I think what makes it worse for a season such as this one is that we don't know all the players yet, and it's taken us a very long time to get to know some of these players. I think Georgia only had her first confessional in this last episode, in episode 6, and she was my first pick coming into the season, so I've been really waiting for some content on her to get a better understanding of who she is as a person and as a player within the game, and if she's going to be a contender long term. I feel like with the way that the edit has been going, I actually don't feel very confident about the Brains at this stage. I don't think there's many people in the Brains that can go out and win the season based on what I've seen. I was really high on Haley last week because of how her edit started, but she's had like 3 episodes in a row now this whole week. Episode 4, 5, and 6, she had 0 confessionals in any of those, which I really think is a really, really bad thing if she's going to be the person who's going to win this.
Yeah, well, I don't read too much into the edit at all. I mean, you look at PR in her season. Christy is a great example of that. In the beginning of the season, she was not on our screens at all. And then later in the season, once it came to the merge, she really emerged as a big character. I think at this point, a lot of the story is revolving around George and Simon, so it's understandable that we're getting a lot of sound bites from them. But yeah, when Georgia doesn't get a confessional until episode 6, when we only get to see Laura talking when her name's in the firing line. To be honest, I didn't even know who Laura was until this last episode. I didn't even know who she was. Georgia, again, I didn't know who she was either, because we're just not getting that content. But I suppose the whole content is revolving around Simon and George at the moment. They're the ones that get in all the airtime because they're the ones that are actually creating all the chaos in camp. It would be nice to see more from people like Laura. Mitch in his boot episode, he didn't get any content at all, really. Even someone like Chelsea, she's got, I think, 3 confessionals so far this season. We've seen a little bit of her around camp, but not really talking to the camera. And most of that was regarding the family photos. So I think we are missing a lot from the characters, but I'm kind of glad that everyone's got a confessional now, and we're not going to get another Sam Shores from that second Champions vs. Contenders season. But let's just hope we get a lot more from these characters. And, if someone's being booted, I hope we get a bit of content from them in that episode, unlike what we got with Mitch. But then again, we also want some in the lead up as well. We do want to get to know these characters.
100%. And we've got Tom Roper here in the chat saying, hey guys, thoughts on Survivor outright voting someone out only to bring them back on a twist? Think this is vastly different to other times where they advertised the non-elimination first in a bad way. I personally, it was very strange for me. I think the editing did a good job in the way that it made me sort of care about the fact that there was this relationship between George and between Kara, and Kara sort of being the person that selflessly sacrifices herself to a certain way. And there was that bit where George, obviously he's in tears and he starts crying and the music is playing and it's really dramatic. It's the fallen hero music that is being played at the same time. And he says to her, why did you do that? You didn't need to do that. You're so selfless. And she says, well, I'm a mom, and I just thought to myself, what a great representation. I know it's not what Survivor is about. Survivor is about being cutthroat. It's about voting people out. We love to see the big votes and the cutthroatness within this game. And like George says, we love to see a good blood culling, seeing the blood flow in these tribal councils. But I felt like if somebody was going to get saved by this twist, I was happy that it was Kara in this situation, giving her life away to George. How did you feel about this scenario? I wasn't feeling as empty as I would normally feel about a non-elimination vote. And I definitely think that doing it this way for me is better than the whole thing about taking two people to the edge and then they come back to the same tribe afterwards where they're a sitting duck again, because at least putting her on the other tribe, she's got an opportunity to work her way back in somehow into this game.
Yeah, well, I think something Wicked has just commented here saying that a lot of people online have said that, they thought it was something that was being rigged towards George, have him potentially come into the Brawn's tribe and then create some chaos there. And I do agree. I've seen a lot of backlash saying, potentially the vote was the parchment at the end of Tribal Council was meant to say, "Dear George, your tribe may have spoken, but your game's not over yet." Obviously, Kara was the one that was in receipt of that in the end. But I do think it is a way for the producers to sort of keep those big characters in the game. Honestly, in the past, I've been really peeved with Australian Survivor for these non-elimination twists. But I think it's this early in the game now where I don't have too much of a problem with it. And I kind of think that, we've had non-elimination twists on every season of Australian Survivor. So it's kind of a given in the game now that we're actually going to get them at any time. I have a problem with them not saying it out front. And I've said this in the past that I'd like to see a twist like Edge of Extinction introduced, which obviously a lot of people hate, and I get that. But something that's blatant from the beginning that can fill those extra couple of episodes that they need to get their requirements on the air, but also not impact the game too much. Why I kind of like this though, it was positioned well, I think, in being in the pre-merge. And obviously, if the next vote is, again, someone switches over to the Brains tribe, it'll obviously level things out there, hopefully. Again, we're not sure if that'll happen or not. But I think, with Kara, I don't think her story was over yet. So I was quite happy with that to see what she has to give. But again, I think, if you're playing Australian Survivor now, you should know that non-elimination twists are going to come at any time. So I don't think people should be as shocked as they are by this being in play.
Yeah, it's a different format compared to the US Survivor and Survivor South Africa if you're watching those international franchises as well. And like you said, it's not new anymore. So you should be plan for the unexpected, I guess, in a season such as Australian Survivor when it comes to voting people out. But one of the things for me that was quite interesting is that, Kara ends up playing her idol and wasting her idol on a non-elimination round, which if she knew ahead of time that whoever was going to get voted out was going to go to the other tribe, she wouldn't have played that idol and they would have still had it in their back pocket. One of the things for me that's really funny is, Riley, is we've had more idols in the game than almost eliminated players. I think there's been 4 idols in the game, and we've had like 6 players or 5 players eliminated. So only one more player eliminated than the idols that have already been in the game. And for me personally, I do feel like it's a bit of idol overkill this early in the game, and I'm wondering where this is going to go. And we see in this episode, and let me actually quickly answer something Wicked, or acknowledge something Wicked's comment here about George's edit being very inconsistent because the producers don't know if he's a hero or a villain. I agree. There's really good points to George, but there's also the villain points to him. But isn't that like being a human being where none of us are perfect? I always find it interesting when we watch these shows and we criticize certain players for being a bad or a good person when all of us are bad and good in our everyday life. We're not always the greatest person. If you're out there and you don't have food and you're put there with people that your personalities just clash with them, the producers do all those things on purpose, then you're going to see the good and the bad in people all the time. I want to move to Simon finding 2 idols in this 3 episodes. What did you think about the fact that we've had so many idols this early in the game?
Yeah, I'm one of the people that are of the opinion that, less is more in the game of Survivor. I don't like when people like Rick Evans and Mike Holloway and Ben Bergen idle their way to the end. I mean, if the idols are in the game, fair enough. But I've always been a fan of the idea that there should be 1 idol at each camp pre-merge and then 1 idol at the merge camp. That gives you 3 idols for the whole of the game. I mean, if idols are played at the first tribal council, then yes, maybe add another one. But for Simon to have 2 idols at the moment after the 6th episode is just ridiculous to me. There should not be that many idols around the camp. I do wonder, with that reward, whether they were hoping that the Brains tribe would win it and then, find the idol there, and then there'd be an idol in the Brains tribe, idol in the Brawn tribe. But I mean, yeah, for someone to have two idols at this stage, it is so overkill, so unnecessary. I think the producers should really wait for one idol to go and then introduce another one to the camp. Having two at a time is just way too much.
Yeah, 100%. We've only seen a few players ever. I mean, David had two idols, and I always think back about James Clement having the two idols and being voted out with both idols. And the question should be asked: will Simon be voted out with two idols? I saw some people ask that question on Reddit within the week. I don't think it's going to happen. I actually think Simon is a very savvy player, but Simon, it's very interesting. His edit is quite big, like Jenny says here. Both George and Simon having these big edits. Does this mean that they are not going to be contenders by the end of the season to win? I don't think George is winning this. I think George is an amazing TV character. I just think we're seeing enough of George not being able to get along with people. I mean, a lot of the things that Rachel comes back into camp and says about George not being a part of the team and creating that cohesion going into challenges is true. But like, George does not want to work with people to a certain degree, and he's had his back up since day dot, like he says. But I don't feel like, there's other ways he could play this. And I just don't think that people would want to vote for him if he gets to the end. He would be that person that would have played like a Russell Hines type of game, maybe strategically doing really well, but then gets to the end with no votes. I just don't see people voting for him. Simon on the other side for me is a different story. I think Simon still could get the David edit. I still think he could get to the end and win this thing. I think his edit up until this point is very similar to David's in that sense. So I'm not willing to count Simon out personally from my end in any case. Also wanted to just acknowledge here, Tom Riper said that he maybe rephrased his question. He asked if Kara wins this now outright afterwards, is that win still acceptable? I'll let you take that one there, Riley. What do you think of a Kara win now moving forward in the game?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be a good look for the show, but I suppose it's early enough in the game. Again, it's pre-merge. Anything that happens in pre-merge really is ancient history in the terms of Survivor. You still got, what are we on day 12 at the moment? And we've got, 36 more days to go. So there's plenty of time left in the game. Yes, it would be a black mark and probably an asterisk against her. And people would, talk poorly of her like they've done with someone like Chris Underwood. Again, I think because it wasn't known that there might be a mark against her. But yeah, it's so early in the game. I don't think you can really put it as that big of a black mark. You look at Tara Pitt in Australian Survivor 2017. She was voted out of the game, then came back in and made it all the way to Final Tribal Council. And I know a lot of people have opinions on that. Myself too. I wasn't too big of a fan of that non-elimination twist. But yeah, I think this one, it's early enough in the game where I don't think it's going to have too big of an impact going ahead. I don't think it's actually going to, change too much in the grand scheme of things. And at the end of the day, she wasn't even the beneficiary of the votes. It was all intended on being on George. So I think it was more crossfire. And I do like that she gets a second chance here, to be honest.
Yeah, personally, I'm not going to hate if she does go to the end and she wins this. I think to like, it's basically a normal Survivor season. If you look at the US of players still left, I think it's still like 19 players left in the game. So for her to go to the end from here and win it, she would have to do a lot of things right. Now, if she does get voted out for a second time somewhere and there's another non-elimination round, that's maybe a different story where you're starting to think, this is a little bit, two times is a little bit bad to be able to be voted out of the game and come back both times. I think only once has that ever happened with Ozzy in Redemption, the second Redemption Island, where he voted himself out and then went to Redemption Island, came back and then got voted out again and came back in the game. And even back then, he could have won. He could have been our first Chris Underwood in Survivor history. And he ended up just not making it. And a lot of people would have loved for Ozzy to win that season. So it really is subjective. Like, Rick Devens in Edge of Extinction, if he won after he came back at the merge, I wouldn't have been personally so angry. I know there's a lot of people who didn't like Rick Devens' edit because similar to George, he got a lot of airtime and things like that. But for me personally, I thought he still had a lot of work to do to get there after coming back from the merge. So I'm personally not too much against that. Another thing I wanted to dive into a little bit here is the Brains tribe and the funny sort of dynamic between them not winning reward challenges, but winning immunity challenges. What do you think sort of plays to that? And, how much does the challenges that they are sort of doing at the reward stage and the immunity challenge sort of affect the sort of that trend that we've seen between the Brains and the Brawns and who's winning the most immunities versus reward challenges? The Brains haven't even won a single reward at this point. It's pretty bad for them because they wouldn't have had anything to eat up until this point either.
Yeah, well, just lentils and rice at the moment. But I mean, the immunity challenges
and rocks that look like Tim Tams.
So That's right, and I'll tell you what, that looked very tasty. I was almost convinced
Yeah.
that Joey had actually smuggled it in a Tim Tam there for a second. I thought, how on earth did he get that? Just a rock, though. I mean, I'm sure it'd be very hard to bite through and get the chocolate out of that one. But no, yeah, the Brains have really been struggling with the reward challenges. But again, the reward challenges don't mean too much. I'd love a Lamington or a cheese toasty or whatever else they're getting, bacon and eggs. But in the grand scheme of things, 2 more days in the game is ultimately what you're there for. You're not there to be fed and pampered every 2 days. So you might as well stick for the long run. Try and avoid tribal council as much as possible. They're winning the ones that matter at the moment.
Yeah, so 2 comments here in the live stream that I just want to address. So something we could say, Simon is growing on me, but something tells me having 2 idols will just make him feel comfortable, which could lead to James on Survivor China moment, which we sort of addressed earlier. I think Simon is too clever of a player to get voted out with it. I know Gerard noticed him get the second idol, which he's not aware that someone knows he's got one of the 2 idols, but I still in my heart of hearts, I just think Simon not being a recruit, which Marcus Evans asks the question after that, which we'll address as well, not being a recruit this season and being a fan since the beginning of the show, basically, I think Simon is not going to get caught out. And I do think we're getting told. Yeah, you go ahead.
I think that Simon actually has a reason to play his idol. Obviously, he wants to get Shannon and that alliance out of the game. He recognizes that his alliance are in the minority now, so he actually needs that to get ahead in the game. I don't think Simon is going to get voted out with both of those idols. I think he's going to use them at every opportunity he has just to gain the majority on his tribe. And obviously, it's going to be crucial with Kara coming into the tribe. I think that's going to play a big role in this next week to see where she lands, which, again, something else he can use as leverage to give himself more numbers. But he needs to overcome the majority at the moment because he recognizes that he's the one on the chopping block. He's got votes at a couple of tribal councils now, so he knows that his people are coming after him, people are gunning for him, so he needs to use those idols to get ahead in the game. I don't think we're going to see him voted out with both.
No, I don't think it's happening. And you basically said exactly what I wanted to say, because we've been told the story between Shannon versus Simon. This rivalry has been built up for a while. And Shannon, for some other reason, isn't getting a lot of the credit as being the leader of that tribe, even though Simon says that she is, Simon says. But at the end of the day, what I think it comes down to is that the reason we're not getting told the story from Shannon's point of view too often is because I think the edit wants us to root for Simon to be the underdog that eventually goes and actually takes Shannon out of the game. I do think he's going to get that at some point, and I think Kara coming over might play into that as well. Now, Marcus Evans here in the chat says, do you guys think that this season's gameplay is very messy strategically due to most of the cast being recruits? From my point of view, it's been hard to know who are recruits and who isn't recruits at the moment that are playing the game. I'm only finding little bits of information out as the game continues. Obviously in this episode 6, finding out that George has been a fan since he was 11, which made me even more of a fan of George. And I'm like, I want him to live out his dream and do well and live vicariously through him being out there. I would like to think I wouldn't freak out as much as he did, but if my back was against the wall, I probably would be running around looking for idols as well. But and also finding out that Kara's a massive fan in Tribal Council, where Joey says that Kara's a massive fan of the show, and she's probably going to play the idol for herself in this episode. So it's been hard. I think a lot of the recruits probably is in the Brains tribe, not Brains tribe, in the Brawn's tribe, I would assume at this point. Riley, do you have more of a handle on who is the current recruits that are playing, and what have you thought of the level of strategic play overall, I guess, even taking the recruits sort of side of things out of it? Have you been impressed?
Yeah, so from what I've heard, apparently a lot of the contestants from New South Wales and Queensland are mainly recruits because of the COVID situation. They were the ones that were able to travel to Queensland to film. So I think that mainly involves players like Chelsea and those types of players. I think Simon might be. I'm not sure if he was a recruit or a fan that applied for the show. I know Benny though was a super fan, as Chris says in the chat here. And he flew all the way over from the United States to play the game. And he was saying in Tribal Council that, he spent so much time in quarantine. He's been playing this game for longer than everyone else just to be out here. So it was a shame to see his journey cut short. And honestly, if that twist was played on Benny, I would not be mad at all, just to see some more of him and actually see him get some time in the spotlight. But
I was disappointed.
As far as playing the game, What's
I was
that? Sorry.
disappointed with Benny. I was disappointed with Benny. If Benny was such a big super fan, right? Why did he not fight? Why did he not put up a fight when it came to the tribal council when Shannon was pleading with him and saying, "Hey, you need to make a case for us to keep you"? And he was offended by that. For me, as a super fan, right, someone that watches the show a lot, I wouldn't take offense to the fact that I need to save myself in that spot. Most likely, what I would have done is if I knew that my alliance was turning against me, is I would have said to Simon, "Mate, you've got a solid vote with you moving forward. Like I'll vote with you guys. Let's flip it. Who do you want out?" Like turn the table back on your alliance if your alliance is not going to keep you in the game. Like he basically laid down and died at that point, which for me personally, I feel like a super fan should not be laying down and dying at any point in the game.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the messiness of the game, I think that comes from the previous season, seeing David Gannett play this, bombastic, dominant game. I think we're seeing players like George and Simon, by playing so balls to the wall, so out there, we're seeing people responding to that, and it's creating a lot of chaos. I don't think it's misplaying. I think it's just people like George excited to be on the show, ready to play, wanting to be another David Gannett or another Luke Toki, trying to be these big characters. Emmett, on the other hand, trying to emulate David. Yeah, okay. Maybe a little bit of that is him being a recruit and him trying to play up to be this big character. But with George though, I think him. I think he's just excited to get his hands in the game, and he's been on the bottom from day one. That he's really scrambling, trying to play this Dirty Harry sort of game, and trying to create as much chaos as possible.
So you were blindsided by one of the best, one of my namesakes. There's a reason. There's been two Chris's in the history of Survivor that have won the show. One of the most successful names in Survivor history has come out of left field here, and he blindsided you by telling you that Benny is a big fan. Because I was just thinking, like, I kind of halfway believed you as well, Chris, to be honest. Because I was just thinking, how can a super fan lay down and die and have such a weak response to being in that spot in the tribal council? There's just no way. Love it, Chris. Awesome for you to be involved in the podcast here and sort of throwing that curveball our way. Now, over here, we've got Jenny K saying, did Brains have Way sit out in the last immunity on purpose? Who is their puzzle queen to get George or his alliance out? It was odd they had his sit out in the challenge with the big puzzle. I believe when they were talking at that point, they were talking to the tribe, and they were more worried about the Brawn part of the challenge, where it was moving those big walls, those big wheels around with when they had to pull people in with the surfboard or the paddleboard out there. I think they said that they needed people with upper body strength, and Way actually said, "Hey, I don't have upper body strength. I'll sit out." So I feel like she actually sat out, and they probably thought the puzzle was going to be a pretty easy and straightforward one at the end there to do. It was really cool to finally see the Brawn tribe actually up the game and actually win one with a puzzle there at the end, because they've been pretty pitiful with the puzzle, and especially coming when it comes to spelling words like Survivor, the very show they're on. Probably another reason why there might not be a lot of fans of the show over there in the Brawn's tribe.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was bizarre looking at that first immunity challenge in episode 4 there, where they were spelling out that word. A lot of conflict in the Brawn's tribe, which I think might be one of the reasons why they've fallen down in immunity challenges, is because there's so many strong voices there. Simon obviously wanted to dictate where the vote goes, and being very, he seems almost impatient. If someone doesn't do something right straight away, he's going to call him out on it. And Benny just in reaction, not doing too much there, and kind of, stumbling over everything, and ended up, ending with his torch being snuffed at the end of the day. But I think with the Brawn tribe, one of the reasons why we haven't seen them winning too many challenges is because they're just a massive clash of personalities. And I think what the Brains tribe have done is to try and keep George quiet. I feel like now he knows where his voice stands, now that he has actually created some of those alliances. And I've almost come around and done a 360 on George in this last week, because I actually think a lot of his gameplay this week was a lot better than his first week. Finding that idol, telling Baden that he found the idol and he knew where he was looking and he was watching him all the time. Creating a new ally, Baden and George as an alliance. I was not expecting to see that at all. He's created this great alliance with Kara as well. He's really starting to rally numbers. I think George this week, I've got to give him massive props, because he has turned his game around completely. And he has, even though he's still in minority, he's only got, now a 2-person alliance with him and Baden. He is trying to, reach out to people and try to make these social alliances.
One of the things I was really impressed by with George and the Baden relationship is both of them understanding that they don't need to like each other to be in an alliance. Like if they've got a mutual sort of cause there or mutual benefit of being aligned because they're outside of that majority alliance, which I think you've got to look at Joey and that majority alliance and say that they're not doing a very good job at hiding that. And that's concerning for me if they were going to go into a swap here moving forward, which we know swap is not very far away. It's going to happen at some point. When they go into the swap, what's going to keep George and Baden and Wei or Kara loyal to them long term? I don't know. Like even Wei's flipping over to that majority alliance to vote here so that she could climb ahead of Baden and Kara in the picking order. I think Wei is smart enough to know that she's going to be very low in that majority alliance picking order when it comes down to the votes, right? So I feel like there's a lot of sloppy play there happening from that majority alliance, and they're not hiding it very well. And one of the things for me that's really concerning for that majority alliance is that we predominantly have Joey as the narrator within the Brains tribe, telling us the strategic thinking and where they're going to go and things like that. And they're really not giving a lot of airtime to some of the other characters within that alliance. So Georgia, we've just heard from in this episode 6. We've had a little bit of Rachel talking, but I don't feel like they're going to be big players personally long term. I'm not getting that vibe from them. And that's why I'm sort of thinking that the winner of this season is going to be a Brawn, not a Brain at this stage. That's kind of where I'm leaning towards with how the edit has been up to this point. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is the big moves that we saw in each one of these episodes. And I think for this, we can probably go in a chronological order. Obviously, in this episode, they go and they vote out Mitch. And for me personally, when I first saw this, I thought Joey made a massive mistake because Mitch was never going to come for him. And I thought that Mitch was a part of that majority alliance. So I don't understand, if you've got a target in the game and that target's name is George, King George, that he wants to dethrone, why do you go and vote out potentially someone that's a number for yourself? What did you think of this move, and do you think that it's going to come back to bite that majority alliance down the track?
Yeah, it almost reminded me a little bit of Survivor China with Courtney, where she voted John Rivera at nearly every tribal council just because she wanted to get him out of the camp. And in this instance, after that first tribal council, Mitch was so annoyed with George that it seemed like he's going to write down his name no matter what until he goes home. So it almost seemed like a vote you could control. Obviously, George having that idol around his neck and playing it for himself is going to be immune from the votes. But in saying that, that's someone that you can bring in because, he's someone that's not going to work with George at all. Why not take that opportunity to take someone out? Like maybe a Kara in that situation, someone that you see actually starting to bond with George. Why not take out Y at that point, who's, one of the weaker challenge members? The whole first tribal council was around picking out the weak and keeping the tribe strong. And Joey seems to be someone that is really a massive proponent for that. And yet keeping Y around. And I mean, obviously in the last episode, we saw that Joey ultimately has her vote. And she's in that a part of that movement to get rid of George now because she wasn't grateful for that move that George made at first tribal council, saving her. But I found Mitch an odd choice here because he did seem like, he was acting against George, but then again, he wasn't really in an alliance per se. So he was kind of one of those people in the middle. It was probably an easy one to pick off.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. So something Wicked is actually saying here in the chat, he or she said that Mitch was on his own. He wasn't in the alliance and didn't know who the idol would be played on. So Mitch was the safe vote in this option. I really thought from what I saw that Mitch was in a lot of conversations with that majority alliance throughout the early stages. We didn't get that defined clearly, I guess, throughout the show to say where he was sitting. Haley did, when she voted, she said that Mitch was in the middle playing both sides. But again, was that her perception of what he was doing, or was that actually what he was doing? I don't know, but probably it did come down to the save vote, and probably because of George doing what he did, which was running around out there with the idol around him, getting the body out, with the idol around there, which I thought was great TV, but it wasn't the best way to play that idol because, it probably would have been a lot better if they thought that they could vote for him and he could then dictate where the vote was going to go by actually playing it correctly on himself and then voting someone out that he wanted out of the game, or potentially bringing it out last minute in tribal. So they had to scramble for a new person there would have probably been more effective than what he actually ended up doing, because I have felt like that majority alliance for a big part of it were very sloppy about splitting votes. And like Marcus says here, Laura should be getting credit for being the person that actually wanted to split the votes, because Joey just wanted to throw all 6 votes on George each time that they went to tribal council. So hats off to Laura for bringing some common sense to that majority alliance as well. Now, looking at Mitch's game, was there anything that Mitch could have done differently to stay in this game? We got very sort of rare glimpses of what he did. I think the first episode maybe, and then a couple of glimpses here and there as to how he was acting around camp. What do you think Mitch could have done differently?
Yeah, well, in the first episode, we got a lot of him being the leader around camp. So we saw a lot of that conflict between him and George emerging. Although later on, he just sort of seemed to fade into the spotlight. He almost took on this reluctant leadership role and, passed the baton on to Joey. And Joey took control. But Mitch, we didn't see him ingratiate himself with any of the tribe members. We didn't see him try and create those alliances. It seemed at the beginning he was well placed with people like Baden and Joey and Andrew. But now we saw that Joey's actually started to rally numbers. Baden shockingly got into an alliance with George. And Mitch just seemed to fade away just into the horizon, just, walked and faded away off screen. So honestly, I don't think he put up too much of a fight, which is, disappointing to see people go out really without, any refusal to, never say die attitude. So it's, yeah, I think we missed a lot from Mitch to really see him fighting and scrambling for his place in the tribe. I think he just thought at the end of the day that we're going to get rid of George or Wyatt no matter what, because they're the two ex-members in the tribe. They're the people that have annoyed the most people. And he sort of got in that mentality. Whereas, by avoiding tribal council for that long, for those 3 immunity challenge streak, they had that opportunity to build more alliances and actually come up with a plan to blindside someone like and Mitch in this case, because he just didn't belong in any alliances, and it was the easiest call to make.
No, 100%. Now, it's quite interesting because there's a massive response in the next reward challenge when the Brawns find out that Mitch is the person that is voted out, because they said, he's one of their best challenges when it comes to doing the challenges. His physical attributes is probably way above a lot of the other people, and we saw him do pretty crazy things throughout those challenges. Even in the one where they have to collect the bags, he's pulling himself up with one arm, lifting the bags off and things like that. So he's clearly one of the more athletic people there. Joey being another person, obviously, that's pretty athletic as well. So he probably could have tried to use that as a way to try and save himself, but he just never saw the train coming until it actually hit him, which was the big issue for him there. But Simon is going to use the age-old sort of argument in this specific episode, the second episode, episode 5, to try and keep his place in the game, because he knows he's outside of the numbers. He knows Shannon knows that he's been coming for her a couple of times in the game. So the only real thing that Simon has for this episode to try and save himself, a spot where he should be going home, is the fact that he's making the argument that he is the best contributor to the actual tribe, and that if they voted him out opposed to like Benny, at the end of the day, that's going to be the tribe getting weaker overall as well. I guess that's the first episode, not the second episode of the 3 that we're talking about. But I think that Simon did a really good job here fighting his case, going to Big Danny. Big D seems to be someone that wants to play a very, for those who watch the Survivor South Africa side of the show, probably like a Santoni type of game where you can float around a little bit more between alliances. But I guess that at the end of the day, he does have a bigger, stronger group of people that does want to work with him and that alliance that's going against Simon's group. But Big D here, he's playing a very risky game for me, moving here in between the alliances the way that he does. Do you think Big D is someone that's going to go very deep in this game? Do you think he's setting himself up really well with jumping between votes?
I don't think he's emerging as a big strategist for that reason. I think he's in both alliances, sort of, where he recognized the need to eliminate that core group of 3. So I think, Simon and Emmett weren't too annoyed with him in that case, because they always knew he was going to be someone that was sort of on the verge, and having that strong relationship with someone like Shannon and Kez, having that relationship there really helped to push that forward for him. I think we're going to see, Danny being someone that can be the flip vote. He can flip flop between alliances, but ultimately I don't think the target's actually going to be put on him, because he's not really emerging as the major game player. Whereas it seems like people like Simon, Shannon, Flick, Hez, and Gerald are probably the ones that are actually calling the shots at the moment, and they're the key members of the alliances. It really seems that the focus of the Brawn tribe is whoever screws up in the challenge is the one that's going to go home, and that's really where their focus is shifting. So I'm not worried too much for Danny, because I think he can sort of position himself well enough where he's not going to annoy too many people. And obviously he's someone that's going to contribute well in challenges as well. So he's a big body that they want to keep around in camp. It seems he's got a good relationship with everyone. so he's not pissing anyone off. So I think it's it's a good position for him to be in. But I think long term, it's probably not going to benefit him though.
Yeah, so something wicked here in the chat says, I think that Danny is going to be targeted because he's the swing vote. He's too unpredictable. For anyone to truly trust him. And I think that if you're playing the swing vote in the way that he's playing it at the moment, you have to continue to swing. You can't swing to another side and then stay with them for 2 votes where they can afford to lose you. You kind of have to be the person that they have to come back to and have that working relationship with, that they know that if they need Big D's vote, he's going to come back because they need that vote to vote the next person out on their hit list. And I think if he can keep that balance right, it's not an easy balance to play throughout the whole game. And if you don't show allegiance to a specific side, I think it's going to at some point it's going to catch up to you and you're not going to be able to continue in the game. And people, like something Wicked says, people will not want to work with you towards the later stages in the game. I do love Big D as a character, though. I can see why he's very popular between his tribe mates. He's clearly got a very big personality, a bright personality. In the mornings doing those workouts with the boxing with Chelsea and those things out there, and just the way that he's ingratiated himself with all the different people that they want to work with him, I think it talks a lot to his social game. But I think that he needs to choose an alliance sooner rather than later, and he has to kind of stick with that if he wants to stay in the game a little bit longer on. And listen, we could be completely wrong here, but it's kind of how I'm reading the situation at the moment. Now, Simon's ultimate pitch here, he's going to get Big D to swap over to him, and then clearly there's that relationship between Shannon and Big D that I think is out there that we've not seen before. That they do have both, I believe, Fijian heritage, so I think that runs quite deep, I personally believe, and I do think that they're aligned to a certain degree because she knew where his vote was going to go when they walked into tribal council. She knew there was a draw coming up, and she sticks with that vote and then ultimately swaps over to vote out Benny in this situation. I personally think this is going to come back to bite Shannon in the butt, and I think that it was the wrong move to get rid of a number on her side. But I also understand why she did it, because Big D didn't look like he was going to swap. I feel like he's one of those people, if he puts his mind to it, he's just going to vote that way. And I don't think the girls really wanted to go to rocks for Benny in this situation.
Yeah, I think the thing that helps Shannon is that Furman is such a big target for Gerald, Kez, and Flick at this point, that all the focus is on him. And I think, a little bit of that might be shifted away from Shannon because she is someone, again, that can switch between alliances at this stage and can act as a number. So it's almost silly to get out the middle number now when you don't have a clear majority now and you actually need her to form a vote. But again, she could be someone that's actually targeted as a result of Simon playing his idol to protect himself at this next tribal council. Someone that Simon recognizes as being a massive social threat, someone that can flip-flop, which we saw a lot of. Emmett trying to pin the vote on Shannon earlier in the season for being a talker, for being perceived as being the strategist in creating that female alliance. So that could be something that comes back to bite her if Simon and Emmett decide to look that way and go after Shannon because she's someone that's going to talk and create chaos within the camp. She could be in trouble. But I don't think Gerald, Flick, and Kaz are going to target her as much because they recognize she might be a number that can help them to firm that majority. And then once they got the majority, they can, eat within their own and try and pick her off.
No, it's a very good point. Now, Anthony Winters here in the live chat says that Flick's alliance could use Big D to their advantage in flushing Simon's idol. They could basically tell Big D the wrong information and go back to talk to Simon about it so they could try and flush it. So I agree, they could do that. The question is, does Flick and Shannon and Kez, do they have the ability to play at that level? Because if they pull that move off, it's going to be one of the best moves in Australian Survivor history. Wouldn't you agree to that, Riley? It would be probably one of the highest level of gameplays.
Well, and the question is as well, is Simon enough of a game player that he actually recognizes that, with Big T approaching him with a vote, is he, going to fully trust him? Is he going to offer up a plan to Big D to take out someone like, say, a Kez, but actually switch the vote alongside Emmett to maybe a Flick or a Shannon? I don't think he's going to trust Big D fully, and he might try and mislead and determine where his idol goes. It could be an opportunity for Simon in this next episode to play the idol for himself, play the idol for Emmett, create a decoy vote, and tell Big D they're going for one person and go for the next. Maybe blindside someone like Gerald, who he knows might be coming after him, or blindside a big player like a Flick or a Kez at this point. There's a lot of options for Simon to make these moves with this idol in his pocket And also, as we discussed earlier in the episode, Kara coming over to the Brawn tribe, I think she's going to be a hot commodity. And I do think that
100%.
alliance of Danny, Kara, Simon, and Emmett,
Emmett.
I think Kara is going to fall into that alliance and actually, become a number with Chelsea, Danny, Emmett, and Simon there. Because we've seen a little bit of her interacting with Danny in that last immunity challenge. She seems like someone that she'd get along with well. So I can sort of see Danny and Kara forming this alliance, and Kara getting along well with Simon. That I can see that Kara being used as, kind of a massive advantage in the game at this point for the Bronze tribe. If someone was to form a majority, they have to be the first to strike with Kara and strike up a good relationship and bring her into the fold.
100%. I don't think Kara is going to this new tribe wanting to be at the bottom of another dominant alliance. She's just been voted out by a dominant alliance. I think she's going to go for the underdog who needs her vote, who's been on the outs the whole time, because her vote's going to be that much more valuable to Simon long term in the game if she ends up saving him in the spot. And what's going to be interesting is, do we at a tribe swap at some point get Simon and George and Baden and Kara all linking up at some point? Do you get the two people who's had the biggest story up until this point in the game? Do they end up reaching a place where they work together within this game? And that's going to be interesting to see moving forward as well. Now, I also want to move on to the last episode here, obviously, where we've got, throughout the episode, we know that the biggest target in the episode was going to be George throughout. And he's now just played his idol in a way where he knows he's kind of wasted it. But immediately he goes and looks for the idol again. And, for all those people who say that things are planted and, they plant idols for people and that's how it works, I've always been of the belief that, yes, that's possible that they could do that, but I don't think producers get that involved, especially in the US. Maybe in Australia, they might do some things with twists. But when he talks to Kara, he's telling her, like, listen, this is where I found my advantage. It was under a rock. I found the idol, which was up in a tree. So these are the type of things you need to look out for. I do think there's a reason that certain players who find idols in a season tend to find more of them, because they've got the knowledge of where it's being hidden and how the producers are thinking about those spots of where they're hiding it. So it gives them a leg up. And by telling Kara this and searching for it with Kara, and there's the funny scene with her reacting to every little thing where she puts her hand in a rock, and every time George is like, did you find it? Did you find it? Because he's so nervous about the fact that he needs it. Kara ends up getting it here, and it's interesting to see how much his alliance wants to work for him. Like you said, when George started in week 1, he couldn't find anyone to work for him. Now he's got people willing to die on the sword for him.
Yeah, I certainly think what you mentioned there with perception regarding idols, there is a reason why Simon and George are finding them over and over again. I've heard a lot of US players in the past say that, people like David Wright, Rick Devens, Christian Hubicki, once they find one idol, they know where to look. They know what spots they're going to be put in. And I think, that experience of finding idols is going to help you to find more in the end. And at the end of the day, if they're the ones that are on the bottom, they're the ones that are going to go looking as well. So that's another factor to consider. But yeah, I think George has certainly positioned himself a lot better than he was at the end of last week. He's got Baden in his camp now. It's just a matter of how he recovers from this next episode. Does he find another idol? Who knows? But at this point, it's looking like writing on the wall for George potentially, if he doesn't come up with another advantage. Although, he's had pretty good luck so far. So, if he gets another advantage, then it wouldn't be a surprise at all.
Yeah, and I can just see people going absolutely nuts if he goes and finds another idol. And, the conspiracy theorists out there will all be saying that he found the idol and that's what's kept him in the game. The producers probably helped him to find this idol. But I don't see another way for him. He's in that minority alliance. Ways flipped on him. I don't think that she's going to end up working with him again, because she's worked her way into that majority alliances. I think she's number 7 in that alliance now, so it's quite low down the totem pole, but it's better than being number 9 on the totem pole at this stage. And I don't think that we see a swap in the next episode. I think with Kara just having moved over to the other tribe, I think that we at least see 1 or 2 more episodes before they potentially do a swap at this stage. Do you think that a swap's happening soon, or would you agree sort of with that line of thinking?
Yeah, I think we're going to get a swap. Not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after. I think we'll have one more week with original Brains and Brawn tribe. And then after, let's say, 3 more vote outs, then we'll probably have a tribe swap to take us into 2 tribes. At the moment, we've got 19 players. So taking away 3 players gives us, 16, 2 tribes of 8, switch things up. I think that's probably what we'll see at that stage coming in later. I'm seeing the chat mentioning Gerald having a great week, and I certainly agree. As something Wicked says here, Chris and I, we picked Gerald as, I believe he was the last boot, the last pick in the draft system. So, he's certainly, the perception of him has changed completely. He's emerging as a very strong social player at this stage. He's really leading that alliance of Flick, Kez, and I suppose also, Benny was a member of that as well. But he's actually, putting opinions out there. He's spotted Simon with the idol. He's, starting to put ideas in people's heads and sort of playing that very social strategic game, which I'm honestly shocked by. I wasn't expecting him to be this massive player, although from what I've seen online, he is a massive fan of the game. He always has been. And also, some hilarious moments with him as well. Obviously, he loves his Lamingtons and his chocolate milk because it's all dairy products, his cheese toasties, dairy products.
Photo shoot for the girls.
It's great to see in this, the photo shoot as well. Great moments and something you wouldn't expect from, a dairy farmer from regional Queensland. He's been such a great value this season. I'm really enjoying seeing Gerald, and I do hope that he goes deep into the game because I do see him being someone that will emerge as sort of a power player in this game. I don't think he has much winner upside, but he certainly does seem to be aware of his position within the game and where other people are. And as Anthony Winters has just commented here, a Gerald calendar, anyone? I'll tell you what. I mean, Gerald posing on those rocks, I think it could make for a worthy calendar. So maybe we get Gerald and Shannon to team up on a calendar there.
I was going to say, David Gannett, get in touch with him for the next towel, the towel thing that they do every year when they have the calendar with the towels for one of the foundations that they do all those celebrity photo shoots for. I think they should get a hold of Gerard for that. And I think that Gerard, personally, if he makes it deep into this game, potentially gets it. Like, I know Australian Survivor is pretty loose when it comes to who they bring back for All-Stars, but I think he could be another All-Star. Like, he's just, as a character and as an archetype with an Australian Survivor, I don't think we've had a Gerard on the show yet. Personally, I think he's quite unique in that sense.
He's a little bit like a Tarzan sort of character, an older guy that's a little bit out there and has this sort of experience in the farm. I think he's kind of halfway between a Tarzan and a John. He's this true blue Aussie bloke from the farm, but he's also got some cheeky antics to him as well, which I really like to see. These characters that we don't expect much from emerging and actually having these exciting moments. And you never know what might happen from someone like a Laura or a Georgia who aren't getting much time in the edit, which it is a shame that we don't get to see those people shine. But I suppose with Australian Survivor, you do get a lot more of those camp life moments that, when we see fun things happening, like Gerald posing, and we see this banner back and forth with Jono as well, we do get those characters sort of start to emerge and they become cult heroes.
I love this from Anthony Winters here in the chat saying the calendar that Gerard should be on has to say God would while he's holding his axe seductively in the calendar. I think that's brilliant. Definitely they should do something with that. And it's really funny for me. I love the fact that when we do these draft picks in the beginning of the season, we clearly don't know what we're talking about. And we had it in South African Survivor as well, where our last pick, your last pick as well for that season, looks like they could be the winner for that season as well. And we've had a last pick here in Gerard. I wouldn't count him out as a potential winner in the season. He gets enough content that I wouldn't completely count him out, because I feel like there's other people I wouldn't like to count out that have gotten less content about themselves and we don't know anything about them. We know Gerard's personal backstory already, which I think is really good if we got that personal content. Another person who's doing really well is Joey on my side, who's my last pick, who's also become a really, really big player this season as well. So it's great to see.
What we saw with Joey in this last episode as well, after that reward challenge, Brawn obviously given the opportunity to take someone back to their camp. They picked Joey because he's one of the more vocal members, and they thought they might get a little bit of information out of them. But I think Joey might be someone that when it comes to a tribe swap, if we get a tribe swap the week after next, he could be someone that'll ingratiate himself well with the Brawn tribe. I think if he doesn't get picked off for being a power player on that Brains tribe, should George come into an advantage at any stage next week, he's probably going to be someone that will form a strong alliance with someone like Simon or Emmett. And, he could create a strong alliance here. And I do see him being someone that's going to be a big character, maybe a bit like David Gannett, who's going to emerge as this big character post-merge. And
I'm getting someone else.
We'll see, some crazy antics from him.
Yeah, he's definitely a big character. I'm getting Luke Toki vibes from him. Every time I see him, he's playing that social game. I think Emmett's more the David Gennard type of character this season, who's trying to be the David Gennard. I think Joey is more like that Luke Toki type of vibe with, Luke Toki found idols, but it wasn't really his biggest thing from the start. The big thing for him was being able to get people to want to work with him. And I guess the big thing with Joey is he's in the majority from the start. He's not in a minority like Luke was, and he doesn't have to work his way from the bottom up. He's already controlling his alliance, and that's slightly different. But I definitely think that he's got that big personality. He's got the social game. He's head of growth, we find out in these episodes as well, which is a head of sales basically. So clearly knows how to build those relationships. And I did in the first watch, when I watched the episode, when he was giving all this information away to the brains, I was a little bit worried about the fact that he was being so loose-lipped about this. But I then thought about it. He was very well, he tried to not give too much, but they were kind of cornering him with those questions. Big Danny specifically asked very direct and pointed questions to him, and I felt like Joey thought if he didn't give them something there, then if they do end up in a swap, they're going to think he's someone that they couldn't work with. So I feel like there was a reason for why he gave the information away about George, and George is in a very minority type of position at the moment where he might not be his downfall moving forward. But overall, I'm liking Joey. I think that he's someone in the game that can go pretty far at this stage as well.
Yeah, and I think another thing you mentioned there, George and the other tribe's perception of him, Rachel made a very good point here where George at the reward challenge at the starting mat is really, a little bit down, reacting to the tribal council the previous night, bringing some of that heat to the challenge, which, casting a lot of negativity on the tribe and making those divisions visible, which I think Rachel was very right to call him out on that and say, stop saying shit like that at challenges because it's going to create divisions within our tribe. It's only going to, further your position at the bottom of the tribe if you keep, whinging about being on the bottom and letting the Brawns tribe know how down and divided we are at the moment. So I think it was certainly smart of Rachel to actually call him out on that. George reacted a little bit poorly to that, which it wasn't. I think he reacted very poorly to that situation. He probably could have reacted a lot better and said, okay, yeah, I understand. Let's be a unified tribe. Because, George really, it seems like on the Brains tribe, it's the George show and everyone else at this point. And he almost feels like he's the main character in the story and Survivor is revolving around him completely. Look, I get it. He wants to be a big character. He wants to have fun on the show. And he has been targeted by everyone at this point. So he wants to, have this revenge story arc. But he needs to be careful with how he's positioning himself, with how he's being perceived by the other tribe as well. So I certainly hope that George can actually recognize how his Brains tribe mates are recognizing him within the tribe and sort of adjust his attitude a little bit around camp.
Yeah, so something Wicked agrees with you. Says Rachel was 100% right about what she said to George. He was very unfair to her this entire episode, despite the fact that both Rachel and Haley flipped on him, maybe because she's an older woman. And I do think that could have a little bit to do with it. Like, I don't know if he would have stepped up in that same way to Joey or if it was Baden on the other side or Andrew. I don't know if he would have had the same animosity towards them. I do want to give George, I'm not condoning that at all, by the way. Like, I think, with my line of thinking, it's just on the show when you've got people coming for you and you're on the outs. I think that emotions run really high and sometimes you take offense to things more than what you would in your real life. And I think that maybe a little bit of that happened as well. I'm not condoning the fact that he was going at it as hard as he did, because I do think Rachel came out of a good place and she wanted the team to unify and work together in the challenges, which in return would be very beneficial to George as well if they don't end up continuing to go to the tribal council or losing the immunity challenges. So he should be really thanking her for it instead of attacking her for it. Another moment here that I wanted to address as well is Chris Dixon said that there was a great moment between Joey and Wei in which he told Wei that they could end up on the same tribe when they swap, and he did it in a really humorous and comforting way, and it could be beneficial to both of them. And I think he said that it might be a little bit of a power duo in between him and Wei, and I picked that up as well. So it'd be interesting to see if Wei and Joey links up at any stage in the game. I do still think if you look at the current Brains tribe, the people in the Brains tribe that stand out the most in that tribe to me, obviously George by a country mile, Joey probably second, then probably Baden and Wei. I feel like, and that's why I'm nervous for that majority alliance, because I just don't feel like there's legs in that alliance at this stage based on what we've seen on the edit so far. Jenny K saying, yes, share Rachel some love online on his socials. I did see that there was some real bad abuse towards Rachel online, and there was some really bad comments made about I believe it was body shaming and about her sexual orientation and things like that. And obviously we do not condone that as fans. That's the really bad side of the fandom, and I don't know who that is. If it's just your casual fans out there or your super fans, I don't even want to differentiate between the two, but it's really, really bad, and we don't condone this on this show. I don't think that anybody, Emmett got a lot of hate last week because of the fact that he was trying to be a budget David, according to a lot of people, and I felt like that's unfair to Emmett as well. Like, at the end of the day, these guys are going out there to make a show. They're trying to put on the best show for us possibly at home, to sit and enjoy this. They're trying to be over the top big characters. I think Emmett is definitely putting on an act when he's doing that, but I think he's doing it from a good place. So I personally don't like it when we do that, because it makes the next generation or the next group of players that are going to go out there that much more fearful about being out there and giving us a good show. Like, I don't know, like, I can't apply for Australian Survivor. I'm not an Australian citizen, but Riley, do you think about these things when you see all this hatred going online, and if you ever wanted to play the game, and how you would be perceived if you tried to be a little bit villainous on the show or be an over-the-top character? And do you think that this is detrimental for future players who want to go and play the game?
Yeah, I saw Pia say something on Twitter there which summed it up perfectly. Australian Survivor is an edited show. It is made to be dramatized. And my fellow Australians would know that, you know, a lot of Australian reality television is centered around drama. It's about, you know, creating reactions, getting people to view the next episode. Obviously, you know, shows like Married at First Sight in Australia are very popular purely because there's lots of fighting and drama, you know, lots of ways to drag people down. But at the end of the day, these are real people. Yes, they're playing characters on a show, but that doesn't define them outside of the game. You know, they're just like us. You got to show them some love. They're playing the game we love. They're, you know, having the chance for lifetime to play this game that so few people get to play. So for them to be spoken about negatively just because of what the show portrays through the edit, I think is just, you know, really, really poor. At the end of the day, yeah, people need to understand that people like George, he's being cast as a big character. He's being cast as the villain. It doesn't mean he's a bad person outside of the game. You know, just
could be your future prime minister, Riley. Could be your future prime minister.
That's right. I don't know about George being my future prime minister, but I mean, look, he's a great television character. If you're saying you won't watch the show because you don't like George, then don't watch the show. But just don't, you know, you don't have to bully people online. It's not a nice thing to see about the Survivor community. You know, my experience with the Survivor community, it's been, you know, very wholesome, but you do get that toxic side of things. But yeah, just don't let it bring you down. Spread positivity, you know, put a smile on your face. Something we could hear in the chat saying, Jerry Manthe is again a great example of that. She was booed off the stage in Survivor All Stars. A lot of negative backlash, but yeah, you got to remember, these are real people outside of the game. They're just playing characters on TV, just like you'd see on, you know, any dramatic TV show. They're playing these characters. It's not the same as what they are outside of the show. You know, if you're playing a villain on a TV show like, I don't know, Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones, you're not the same person outside of the show. You're playing a character. These real people. So yeah, spread positivity. They're having the time of their life. So, you know, go give them props for playing the game and having fun out there.
And if you want to put heat on someone, go put heat on the people that are editing the show. Because, like I said in the beginning of the episode, like, you know, we've only had a certain amount of people get a lot of airtime. Maybe we should be more angry about the fact that they're not showing other players and their thinking about certain situations within an episode as well. Because George is not to blame for the fact that he got 37 or 34 confessionals at this point. He doesn't choose what gets shown and what doesn't get shown. But coming back to Rachel, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the hatred towards her was not even about about the game. It's about her personal life and how she looks, which I just think is appalling for people to dig into those kind of things. And I refuse to believe that those are true fans of the franchise personally. And maybe I'll get hate for that. I just don't want to be associated with that line of thinking. And for me, I think everybody, I love the fact that in Australian Survivor, they choose people from all age ranges. It's not just young people. It's not just models. I think the worst thing you can do for Australian Survivor is put a bunch of models, young, good-looking people out there, and have no diversity in age range or backgrounds of what they're doing and things like that. Or, that to me is really, really just appalling. Like, I think that Australian Survivor is doing a good job, is what I'm trying to say with that aspect of it. I think the Brawn's tribe is a little bit more similar, and the Brains tribe has got a little bit more diversity in age range and what people are doing. Where in the Brawn's tribe, there's a lot of fitness enthusiasts and bodybuilders that kind of look at life very much the same way, and you're always going to get typecast in the season such as this when you've got a Brawn's tribe together. But overall, I think they're doing a good job, and I want to see more people apply. I don't want people to be afraid of going on the show based on how they look or how old they are or different stuff like that. I just think it's really bad. Okay, moving on from this really bad subject into something more positive. Let's talk about the gameplay here at the end of this episode. Baden comes up with the plan where they potentially are going to play a bit of hot potato with the idol going into tribal council, and they end up following through with this. What do you think of this strategy? Do you think that there was anything else that they could have done better in this scenario? It kind of reminded me of, back in the day when we had the Three Amigos, and I kind of felt like they needed to do something similar to this, where they should have played hot potato with the name on who they potentially could have voted for. They did that in the episode, but this time it was with an idol instead. Did you like what they were doing here, playing from the bottom?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Three Amigos, because I literally just finished watching that only a couple of days ago. I'm rewatching Caramone now, but I do like how they sort of had this musical chairs with the idol. It did create a lot of theatrics at the tribal council there, and cast dispersions for the other alliance to figure out where the vote was going. In the end, obviously, as the alliance was just a majority of 7 players, it didn't bode too well for that alliance. I mean, they only had one idol. There were 3 people. It seemed like one of those were destined to go home. Look, Kara's idol play, I'm a little bit disappointed from a gameplay perspective. Cheering for Kara and her own position within the game. I would have liked to see her play that for herself and keep herself safe. But it was so nice to see George being thankful for Kara playing the idol for her. I've seen a lot of people saying that, it was fake emotions from George. I believe it came from a genuine place, because Kara was probably one of the few people that actually reached out to him when he was feeling at his lowest around camp, and they did seem to have a good relationship there. So I think massive props to Kara for selflessly playing her idol for George, putting her game at peril to keep George safe in the end. It would be nice to see Kara play her idol, but I mean, in the end, it didn't matter because she got voted onto the other tribe, it seems. So, she's got nothing to worry about in this episode, and she's probably in a better position now than she was in the past, just by not playing that idol for herself and being voted out. But it's great to see theatrics, and we got 2 revotes on this last week of episodes. Obviously, with Benny's vote being a revote, with Shannon switching the vote then onto Benny and sending him home, and again here, where Joey's alliance split the vote between George and Kara. Ultimately, it came down to Kara and Laura being the people eligible in the revote, and Kara goes home here. It's nice to see lots of moving parts in this game and unpredictable tribals. I really like that we're getting a lot of this where we don't know who's going to go home in each episode. I mean, that Mitch blindside was, a bit of a shock for me. Kara going home after playing her idol selflessly. It's, crazy to see all these shocking tribal councils. And yeah, I'm just glad that we're getting all this high level of gameplay. I just hope that it continues throughout the season, because at the moment it's turning into a chaotic season, and I'm really loving it at the moment.
So we've got Something Wicked saying that I respect her, but as a Survivor superfan who can't apply because I'm living in the UK, we don't have a version. I was screaming at her. I'm aware that you guys don't have a version over
Absolutely.
in the UK, and I hope that you have joined. If you're on Twitter, Something Wicked, go join Revive Survivor UK on Twitter. I've joined them and have tweeted out at the local production team there that did it previously to bring it back. The more people that can join the cause, and we potentially will have the person who's running that on the show at some stage to talk about Survivor UK and the previous seasons that played there and why it should be brought back to the UK. We want to give more visibility or make more people aware of the fact that it's not over there, and we want to bring it back already. So you've already joined it. Great. So so to get back to Kara, I understand as a super fan, I normally would crucify someone for falling on the sword and sort of voting themselves effectively out of the game here. For some other reason, it just got me, this vote, because of the fact that there was this whole relationship between George and her. I thought it was wholesome. He had his bag ready to go when she walked up and she said, "I'm playing the idol," and she was playing it for him. He had his bag and everything ready to go. He thought he was out, so he already made peace with the fact that he was going to not get to the end. He's been dreaming about this since the age of 11, which means that he's a day one fan probably of Survivor, because he's about the same age as myself. I think he's like 31, isn't he? So he must have been watching it since day one, and for him to feel like he was going to fall short and not even make the merge, and then from nowhere getting saved in the spot, I think it was raw, true emotions from his end. And I'm not going to lie to you, I don't tear up very easily. The last time I teared up watching Survivor was when the Tony Vlachos and Sarah Lucina fire-making challenge happened in Winners at War, and I just saw that relationship where one of them had to go before the end. And this one made me feel really emotional about it. I thought, man, this level of selflessness from Kara to sort of give this idol away to keep him in the game, it was something to be seen. And her saying that, I'm a mum, that's why I'm selfless, I think is a great example for mothers out there and what they do on a daily basis, because they give so much of themselves away, sometimes without asking anything. And that's just what moms do in general. But I really hope that now that she's been given the second chance in the game and she's going over to the Brawn tribe, that she's not willing to fall on the sword for anyone for a second time. George didn't ask for her to do it this time. He actually told her prior to the vote, don't play the idol on me. And he actually told her, don't play the idol. He said, keep your idol, because they will vote me out. They'll probably split the votes on us, and then eventually they'll vote me out. So you'll still have the idol. So he tried to give her good advice, good strategic advice, and he was being selfless and not, because his normal nature is to be selfish in the game. We see it over and over. He was being selfless with her, and I think she saw that, and they've just created this general bond and friendship between the two of them. Marcus Evers here says, last time I got emotional was Luke's vote out, and yeah, that was another one, Marcus, that got me, because Luke Toki is one of my favorite players, definitely my favorite Australian player, probably right up there with the top of 2-3 favorite players of any version of the show, and that got me as well. Chris Dixon, I teared up watching David's wife and daughter arrive on the island. Yeah, I don't think I teared up for that one, but I was pretty happy for him. Like, I don't tear up in general. I'm just not that kind of person. This one got me for some other reason. I don't know why, man, but I'm really shouting for George. I really want him to go deep into this one as well. Jenny K saying that for her it was Christy winning immunity on season 1. Yeah, they're very good, this show, with the music and how they create this mood. It was the Fallen Hero music playing for Kara when she was leaving. It was very somber. I know there was this joke going around with how Australian Survivor edits versus Survivor South Africa, and then they put the more dramatic music into the edit, which is really funny to watch. But it's just, they are good at producing. I think where Australian Survivor is ahead of a lot of shows is in the challenges. They've got far superior challenges to any other version of the show, and no one can tell me that's not true. I far more enjoy watching Australian Survivor challenges. And then the second thing is they're really good at creating cinematic episodes that makes you feel like you're watching a movie and invoke some sort of an emotion and to get into the show at some point. Now, Riley, we've got to get into our draft picks here and see who we've lost in this episode. So the first person that was going to go is Benny, and he's from my team. So I lose a person there in that spot. And then you lose Mitch this week as well. So we've lost 2 players, with 5 being out of the game at this stage. I believe I'm 1 ahead of you at this point. Yeah, 1 person ahead of you at this point. So it's pretty tight.
Yeah, that's right. Very tight. And I mean, some strong contenders emerging. I look at my tribe there. I'm still hopeful that Haley will do well in the game. Flick as well, still in that majority alliance on her tribe. Kara, again, I think she's one to watch on this new Brawn tribe. I think she might be someone that can actually, finagle her way into that alliance with Simon, Emmett, Danny, and Chelsea. One to watch that might emerge in the power position. On the opposite tribe, though, on the opposite alliance, rather, Gerald emerging as a strong player who, again, we picked him last out of all the males. So to see him doing so well is unbelievable. And the other person that was on the bottom of our male rankings on your tribe, Chris, is Joey, who is emerging as a a massive player in this game. Again, looking at some of the other players, we've mentioned Simon and George, two massive characters. Shannon, your tribe as well, emerging as sort of this strategist that can sort of flip between both alliances. Kaz as well, we've got a fair bit of content there with her having that alliance with Flick. So, lots of great characters that have emerged, and, we're starting to get to know a lot better. Unfortunately, we got to see Benny and Mitch go in the end. We didn't get to, really get to know them all that much. So it's a little bit of a shame that they have gone out so early. But I mean, that's the game of survival. We get introduced to one contestant, one episode, and they go on the next. It's always a shame to see people go, but we've still got 19 strong players left in the game, but it's going to be a really exciting couple of weeks ahead as we build up to this season and we really get going here.
100%. So I just want to finish off with who we thought was the. Normally we do player of the episode, but because we've had 3 episodes, I think we should mention who we think are the 3 players that are best placed at the game at the moment to go all the way and win this thing. And I'll start us off here on my side while it gives you an opportunity to think about who you would put as the 3 players to watch out for moving forward in the game. I'm going to continue to put Simon as one of the 3 power players that could still go very deep in this game. I know he's been an underdog. He's been in a minority alliance. He found the 2 idols, which is probably going to keep him safe for a little bit in the game if he can play it correctly. I get very strong David Gannett vibes in the way that he's being edited. I don't know if that means that he's going to go all the way. He's not the same character in how he comes across, but I feel like he's someone that knows the game well enough. He's a fan of the game. We've continued to see his point of view as the minority person within that alliance consistently. So it's almost like we're watching his story. If we're watching George's story for the Brains tribe, we're watching Simon's story for the Brawn tribe at this point. And I think it's for a reason. I don't think both of them will go all the way, but I think Simon is the most likely one out of the 2 that have got the best social ability to build some great networks with Kara coming over as well. It's someone that I think can go pretty far in the game. Over in the, in the Brains tribe, you can't count Joey out at the moment as someone that is a power player that could go pretty deep in the game. I think Joey is aligning with a lot of people. He's got a lot of social skills. We mentioned that he could be another Luke Toki type of character. He's going over to the Brawn tribe this episode, shown as someone that the Brawn tribe were really happy to see there, and they just gravitated towards him. So I think he can potentially work his way into any type of majority Brawn alliance down the line. So he's someone that we should still be looking out for. Now, I would love to say Shannon, because for me, I love Shannon. I think Shannon's a great player. I think she's probably a better player than what the edit is giving her credit for at this stage. But a lot of that is not being shown because we're being told either the story here of Flick and Kez within those 3-girl alliance. So I'll have to go with Flick, which I think you mentioned last week. I think Flick is another dark horse at this stage that could win the game as well. So between Flick, Simon, and Joey, those would be my spots. And then honorable mention to Gerald, who I think is starting to climb the ranks pretty quickly as well. Do you agree on those picks, or do you have a view on different players that you think we should be watching out for moving forward?
Yeah, I'm really looking at Flick as someone that's going to run the gambit in the long run. I do want to give, player of the week mentions to both Joey and Gerald. I think Gerald is starting to, find his position within the tribe. He's obviously got a strong alliance with Flick, Kez, Flick, Kez, Shannon, and Daney there. And he's starting to be very perceptive around Kev, which I'm liking to see. And he's obviously a well-liked character as well. Joey as well, rallying that alliance. He's done a great job at dictating the vote and creating that alliance around him. I do want to give massive props this week to King George of Bankstown. I know he hasn't really been a fan of me and my opinions on him so far this season. But I do want to say, George, if you're watching this week, I've really enjoyed watching you play. I have cringed a couple of times, but I mean, he's still not in the best position. I don't think he's winning the game at all. I do think he's going to go pre-merge very soon, but the way he's recovered his game and created that alliance with both Kara and Baden. Baden was probably one of the players that I thought he would never be able to make an alliance with, and somehow they managed to form that bond. So I think it's great to see that George is actually starting to play the social game here. He's recognizing his position within the tribe. Still some misplays, like that conversation with Rachel, didn't bode too well for him. But I think seeing him use his idol as leverage to create that alliance with Baden and Kara is certainly a positive from his side. So look, my perception has certainly changed on George this last week. Look, George, you're still not my favorite player, but I can certainly see the merits to your game that have emerged this week.
I was going to say you nearly missed out on the most important part of his alliance, the Diego. Do we think he's going to get Diego back on in the next episode? We'll have to wait and see if he finds Diego, his long lost friend, after it's been played this episode. But overall, I've been really enjoying the season. I'm starting to warm up to it. Last week, I wasn't fully into it because I really felt like there was only like 5 players I knew after the first week. I do feel like out of the 18 or 19 players that are in there now, we've slowly but surely gotten to know every single person. I think trying to think if there's anybody who we haven't really seen. I think Georgia was the last person we needed a confessional from, which we finally saw. But I am disappointed that there's a few players that we haven't been able to check in with for a while. So Haley being one of those that I thought had a lot of promise in the game. But, you can't have everybody on the TV screen every single episode. And like you said, it has to be around the players that are actually running the game at this stage. Also, just before we finish here, we've got one last question here coming in from Chris Dixon. Why do we think that Baden isn't in the majority currently? I actually think that George was probably a little bit more right than what Baden would like to admit. Baden was a bit older. They talked about the fact that he had a bum knee or something like that. He's probably just not gelling as well with the younger crowd within that group, and maybe they just thought that he doesn't see life the same way. It's very hard to tell. Like, he could just be more of an introvert. Other people have just gelled a little bit better at this stage. Again, this is where the edit is not telling us the full story at the moment. Now, guys, it's been great having all of you in the live chat today. We've had a great group. I think 16. We averaged 16 live views for quite a long time, which is probably the most we've had in any of these live shows. So we really want to thank everybody for that. If you could leave a like on the video, it'd be much appreciated. It helps with the YouTube algorithms recognizing us in the YouTube algorithms as well. And also, if you can hit a subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, we really would appreciate it. We're getting closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. Now, over to a man who's just reached 1,000 subscribers on his own YouTube channel, Riley, aka Snuffed on YouTube. Congratulations on hitting 1,000 subscribers, and tell us what you're doing next on your own channel.
Yeah, well, I've got a 1,000 subscriber special in the mix. I won't say what it is just yet, but keep your eyes peeled for that one very soon. I'm working on that one at the moment. Other than that, continuing my journey to Soul Survivor for all the 40 winners of US Survivor. Bob Crowley up next from Survivor Gabon. I know that Gideon from the Survivor Buffs has high opinions about Gabon, it being one of his favorite seasons. So if you want to find out how Bob Crowley won Survivor Gabon, then feel free to head over to my channel over at Snuffed.
Great. Well, we'll be back this week on Saturday. It should be evening, I believe, if we get our special guest. I've just yet to confirm if this special guest will be on the show. They said they would, but I don't want to preemptively say that they're going to be on it. It is a big Survivor South Africa legend coming on the show to talk, hopefully, about the next episode of Survivor South Africa. If they're on the show, it should be around 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time that we go live. So join us for that one if you're watching Survivor South Africa. And we'll be talking about the next episode there. And then on Sunday, it will be pre-recorded, but we'll have the next exit interview for the latest evicted castaway from Survivor South Africa, Immunity Island. Guys, as always, next week we'll be back at the same time, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. It's been great having you on the show, and talk to you next week. Bye.